Okay, so today we're diving into soul contracts. Soul contracts is one of those like juicy topics where you're like, what's the tea, right? Like, what's the goss? So, soul contracts I find incredibly interesting. And they have also helped me to kind of keep my hands out of other people's business. I'm going to explain everything. Okay, so let's talk about what it is first, and then we'll talk about how it shows up and why. So, a soul contract you can think of essentially as like an agreement. It's two souls before you came into these bodies, this life, who said basically, I'm going to be this for you, and you're going to be this for me. Now, sometimes it's benevolent and beautiful and harmonious, and it's inspirational, and you help each other, and it's the light of your life. But sometimes it's a little tumultuous, it causes tension, and it isn't always super comfortable, right? Sometimes it verges on incredibly uncomfortable or even into traumatic. So, a soul contract is an agreement that basically who I'm going to be in your life is going to help you to get whatever it is that you're signing up for in this lifetime. So my belief system is that we all come with like a theme on our life. You know, there's a set of lessons, a set of growth that we're signing up for. And so we kind of decide like I'm going to have these sort of tension situations. I'm going to have relationships with certain people and all of it is going to trigger up, instigate the part of me that I want to develop in this lifetime. Now, when you start thinking about it like that, it's kind of cool, right? You kind of start seeing the people in your life a little bit differently, especially the ones that maybe trigger you or rub you the wrong way, right? Now, our most intense soul contracts tend to be the ones that we have with our family members or with our partner. And the reason for this is it is essentially a contract that you can't really run away from that easily, right? So when we have, say a soul contract with a friend or someone in passing or a boss or something like that, there's like, few escape routes, right? We can be like, I'm cutting this person out of my life. I don't like you. You trigger me. Get out, right? And we can sometimes do that a little to the extreme where we're missing what the lesson is that this person was meant to give us in the name of I'm setting boundaries and get out of my life, right? Like we'll go there in a second. But our soul contracts with the people who we live with, who we're related to, who we're married to, those soul contracts tend to have the bigger, more profound lessons. And if you think about it, like, we talk about our snow globe all the time, right? The whole world is a reflection of you in some way. Now, I want to say this because I said I taught words. I said this in the Miracle Matrix in our very first foundational module last week. It is not that physical things represent you. It's not like, oh, this cup is me. It's not like that. It's the way that you feel about it. It's the story you tell yourself with it. Do you feel me on this? So it's like whatever the story is, the feeling that is reflected back to you is the energy that's being shown to you of who you are in your snow globe. So you think about the whole world as a mirror to your energy, not necessarily physical things. Does that make sense? So people are the same way. People are going to reflect back to us a feeling. You guys already start to see it, right? They're going to reflect back a feeling. Sometimes they're going to reflect back a big trigger. The feeling might be like, you drive me insane, or it might be an insecurity that gets reflected back to you, or it might be something, it also can be very positive and beautiful as well. But we're talking about in terms of the lessons that you're here to learn. So when you have your soul contracts with the people that you live with, you can't really avoid those. You know what I mean? And that's with purpose. So I want you to again think about two souls come into agreement and they're like, okay, I'm going to be this for you and you're like, okay, I'm going to be this for you. And it's going to instigate whatever it is that you need to learn in this lifetime, the thing that you chose, your theme of life. So when we have the people in our household, we can't really escape that mirror, can we? And this is why sometimes, being alone can feel so much easier because the majority of our soul growth lessons are going to come from our relationships. Things and circumstances and all of that, yes, they can deliver us some big lessons, but the majority of the real big lessons are going to come when we are interacting with someone else's energy. And so if you have your partner or your children or whoever who is in your household with you, it is a constant reflection to you. It's like, ooh, getting hit again. Ooh, getting hit again. Ooh, getting hit again. This is why your children might trigger you a lot. This is why your partner might trigger you. This is why a family member might trigger you. It is not because they are this, and that, which is what our ego likes to do. Our ego likes to project and say, if they would just be different, they are doing their job in fulfilling their half of the soul contract by just being who they are and it triggering whatever needs to come out in you. So our job then becomes to start paying attention. If there's a constant reoccurring theme, say, so we'll just go with one relationship. If there's a constant reoccurring theme of you getting triggered by someone you love, that's supposed to happen. I know. I know. We have been sold fairy tales our whole life saying like you're supposed to meet Prince Charming and it's happily ever after and you never get triggered, or you're supposed to love all of motherhood and never get triggered by your children. It's like, no, actually, they're supposed to be triggering you because they're showing you the parts of yourself that still need growth, need healing. They're doing their job. And mind you, you trigger them too. Like it's a two-way street, right? So when we start looking at it from this perspective, well, then we get to kind of see it as like the game for what it is. If I am constantly being triggered by my child, my job is not to try to like submit, like get them into submission to where I feel better, right? My job is like, what part of me is getting triggered by this person right now? I'm so glad. I'm so glad. What part of me is getting triggered? Even by like, so my youngest is 10. This girl is a powerful little thing. Powerful little thing. And she'll hit on things in me all the time. And so if I am like triggered all the time, but she's 10. She's just being herself. You know what I mean? My trigger, my emotion is me. It's mine. And so it's my job to be like, okay, why does this bother me though? And what's cool about this is that as I do my work to heal, then I am not going to be triggered anymore. This is the most beautiful, wonderful part of doing the trigger work. Because as I look at myself and I take ownership over my feelings, right? It's like, think about the flip. I'm going to blame her for how I feel. Like, okay, who's the adult in the room? One, right? Like, but two, when you take that ownership, you are owning your power. You are taking control of yourself, which is the only thing we truly have control over. But we're always kind of in this state when we're leading from that ego state that feels like we're victimized by everything around us. We think, oh, I need to change that person or I need to change that situation. But really, the situation and the person is just showing you parts of you that are like, oh, I haven't really healed this part, or I haven't really grown in this part. So in the Miracle Matrix, I call them your areas of opportunity for empowerment. When you get triggered, that's an area of opportunity for empowerment, right? That's an area of opportunity for growth. Because if I want to like project and yell onto somebody, that's not really healed and grown, is it? You know what I mean? So we start taking ownership for it. And what's cool is that as you do your part and you heal in it, you're going to see a shift and a change in them because we're all interconnected. We're all connected in everything that we're doing all the time. And so as I would shift my vibration, what I'm going to see in her is she's going to relax a little bit. You know what I mean? And that, especially with our kids, like that's our role as parents. It's like, okay, let me own my shit, right? Let me own my stuff. And then as I own my stuff, it helps me to be a more solid, strong energy in her life. And then that's going to affect how she grows up. You know what I mean? So these soul contracts that we sign up for are always to help us in the long run. They're not always comfortable, right? Especially when so we'll talk about with your partner. It's not always super comfortable, right? Like we get into these ego battles where you're like, I'm right. No, I'm right. And you're raising up in each other the things that you need to look at for yourself. And it's honestly, it's sacred. It truly, truly is. I've told this story. It's been a while since I've told this story, but if you've been around for a while, you've heard it before. When I met my husband, it was just this instant, like, this is my person forever and always, right? But our first year together was nothing but triggers. I mean, it was like trigger, 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 trigger. It was all from love. I mean, like, there was no like, oh God, I don't like him. What I realized was that he was triggering up everything in me that needed to come out to be seen because he wasn't doing anything like purposefully wrong. You know what I mean? He was just being himself. Like, he wasn't being an asshole. He wasn't any of that. But I was getting triggered. And I realized, oh, I am meant to see these parts of myself. I'm meant to do this healing. And he's my person, you know? And there was such a solidness in our relationship in terms of like there was no second guessing that this is my person that I was able to see that. Now, granted, I've been doing this work a long time, right? Way before I met Robert. But I was able to see that the stuff that's getting triggered up in me right now is stuff that's asking to heal. It's not, he didn't cause this. I hadn't been with him long enough for him to cause it. You feel me on that? Okay, let's see some of these comments. Let's see. Chris said, I did one of the techniques when I was triggered by my partner. And when I looked at what it brought up, when I looked at what it brought up in me instead of focusing on him was mind blowing. Yes. Yes. And isn't it so cool? Now, I will say this does not excuse like people, if people are, rude to us or whatever. It's like we don't go, oh, like bad behavior is okay. But what we do is just own our own feeling in it. Right. And it's like, oh my God, like it will show you parts of yourself that you've been running away from, things you've been kind of suppressing down or hiding within yourself. It's going to bring it all out to play. Okay. Amanda said, this is amazing. I needed to hear this today. Heather said, OMG, I needed to hear this. Desi says, how do we know this to be true? Well, I mean, you don't really. But what I do know for sure is that as I go through life, if I spend my whole life blaming other people for how I feel, then I am not in power over my life. That's what I know for sure. Now, like I've said before, and I've said a million times, I'm bringing you my belief systems. If they land on your body as true, beautiful, run with it. But if it doesn't land on your body as true, leave it and go find another way that feels like it works for you. You know what I mean? Chris said, yes, when I caught my story and focused on me and my partner shifted quickly. Yeah. And this is the magic, right? It's like, as you kind of start to take ownership for you and you stop trying to change everybody else, right? Because like how maddening and frustrating is it to try to control another person? Like have you ever tried to control another human? Like try to control your 5-year-old. And that's a tiny human, right? Like how are you going to control your partner? How are you going to control your boss? How are you going to control perfect strangers? How are you going to control politics? How are you going to control? You can't. And we're not meant to control it. We are meant to have our individual experiences and our own growth that we need for ourselves. It's like if I get triggered and hit all the time, that's because there's something in me getting triggered and hit all the time. It's not because the whole world is some certain kind of way. Do you feel me on this? Heather said, I'm so glad you brought this up about children and people that you can't just cut off. Exactly. Exactly. Now, there is the healthy, I'm going to cut you off, right? There's the healthy, I'm going to cut you off. But what I will say is, even with the people who need to be cut out of your life, like people who are just not good for you, like not treating you well, you still need to do that inner work on what they raised up in you. Because if not, you're gonna end up manifesting a different person who triggers the exact same stuff. Like, anybody dated multiple people, but it was all the same person reoccurring in your life, triggering up the same stuff, right? So it's like you got to start looking at it from the perspective of, things are coming into my life to reflect back to me the healing that I need, reflect back to me the growth that I'm signing up for, to reflect back to me. So at the end of the day, like, if you can really tune in to your emotions and what you're feeling on a day to day basis is not who you are. Okay. This is really huge. It's not who you are, it's the experience you're having. So if who I am is the constant witnesser of what's going on around me, then I can become that steady space that when I get triggered, I'm like, oh, that was interesting. Why am I triggered right now? Right? Or you start noticing, like Chris has said here, I dated the same person in a different package many times to get the lesson. Me too. Me too. And the thing is, it's this perfect universal mechanism to help us get what we need to get. But the cool thing about it is, once you heal the thing inside, you don't repeat it anymore. Ah, praise, praise, right? And I am living proof of this in terms of a relationship. Like, I repeated the same guy, different bodies, same guy for 10 years. And then once I started really prioritizing myself and doing that inner work, asking myself, why am I allowing this in my life? You know what I mean? Like, why am I putting up with this? Why am I attracting this? What is this in me that is creating this? Because at the end of the day, you could push all the energy stuff to the side. You could push the esoteric to the side. You could push the soul contract to the side. You could push all of it to the side and literally just get down to the nitty gritty that says, what in me has lowered my standard to decide that this is okay, that being mistreated is okay. And just you got to get in there and be like, what in me is creating this? What in me is allowing this, right? So then we bring all the energy stuff back in, because that's the world I live in. And you start to ask yourself, okay, so in what Heather was saying, people you can't just cut off. Your kids triggering the bejesus out of you, your partner triggering the bejesus out of you, right? Like, the person you chose to do life with, if you're married, triggering you left and right. That on purposeness is so that you can't run away from it, because we're really good at running away, aren't we? Like, we're real good at running away from feelings we don't want to feel. So when you're married to it or when you birthed it, that is when you really got to start paying attention. You know what I mean? And you're going to feel a lot, right? Because if you think about, like, say whenever you get married and become a mother or become a mother, you're shifting out of one chapter of life into a new chapter of life. Like, you're never going back to single, no kids once you have kids, right? And so think about the gravity of that. The, like, there's no going back feeling. And I'm not trying to give anybody anxiety here, but what I am saying is that is part of what you're meant to be in. There's not many things in our universe where there's no going back. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, there's no going back, but there's not many things that you can't be like, never mind, I'm going to move on from it, right? There's a lot of things we can just move on from. But when you have a child or you commit to marriage, it's it's like there's purpose in that beyond just, oh, I checked the boxes of society that said you're supposed to get married and you're supposed to have kids. There's purpose there. So we've got to look at like, okay, what is this instigating in me? Okay, so I'm going to give you a further practical example with my youngest, 10 years old. So powerful. Okay, I'm her stepmom, mind you. Soul contracts, it doesn't matter if you actually birth them or not, because the soul contract is the agreement between souls of how we're going to affect each other. She is like almost exact in personality, in energy to who I was as a child. Like, it's wild. And she is so powerful. Like, she has so much energy in her. She's so articulate. She knows how to like she can tune to you. She knows how to think ahead and plan. Anyway, what I'm saying is she is this powerful, powerful little 10-year-old. A few years ago, she was triggering me all the time. And I was like, what is wrong? And here's what I realized. And it was such a profound realization that I still have, like, when you have those moments, those very pivotal moments, you know exactly where you were and exactly the moment you got it and what was happening around you. Well, I remember this exactly. So my husband and I were on our camper van trip, and I was sitting in the passenger side of the camper trip, and it was just this epiphany. And I thought, oh my God, this child was triggering me so much. At the time, she was 7. This child's triggering me so much because as a 7-year-old, she's owning her power more than I am. Right. And it was just this moment of like, oh, holy everything. Oh. And it immediately, and this was what's so cool about having these profound understandings, immediately it dissipated because it was like, oh my God, I get it. Like I see it. I see what her, at least right now, this purpose of this part of it is triggering up in me, that she's 7, owning her power. And I was not. And so in that moment, it's nothing but gratitude, right? It's like, oh, it was trigger, 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 trigger. But it's just triggering you to get your attention. It's not triggering you because there's something bad. That was a beautiful thing. There was nothing bad about that at all. But it's triggering you so you'll pay attention. Because here's the thing about humans, and we got to know those. We don't typically seek out what we need when everything is good and flowing and happy and joyful. Do we? Do we? When do we seek hard? When do we seek hard for growth for what we need? We seek hard when shit is not going well. You know? When we feel triggered, when we feel the tension because we're seeking solution to the feeling. So when you get a trigger, it's not saying something bad is here. Truly, it's not. And if I can like really, really drill this in, it's not saying this is bad. It's saying pay attention. It's just trying to get your attention. If something triggered absolute joy and love, you would just bask in it. You wouldn't be seeking growth and solution and all of that. So the triggers don't feel good so that it will get our attention and we'll seek a little harder. Does that make sense? So this is like, we talk about in the spiritual world, everything, like everything is happening for you, right? And we're like, I don't know about it. Because when things are not going well, we're like, I don't see how this is happening for me, right? But this is a perfect example of that in something that doesn't feel that good, getting triggered all the time, wanting to run away from it, wanting to get out of that feeling. And the solution or the gold in it is actually incredible. It is actually like so beautiful, so empowering. And the only way that you can get that beautiful, empowering gold that's in the trigger is by going into it and getting curious about it. What is actually being triggered in me right now? Why does this upset me? And it's that work of like really owning your own emotion. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying it's easy. It's not easy. It's not easy because our first reaction is to blame and to want the other person to stop. Like, stop it. Like, stop it. But that isn't sustainable. You can't control the whole world forever. You know what I mean? Like, you might, if you're lucky, be able to control your kid for a day. Maybe, right? But they're humans. They're dynamic. They're going to have their own, like, ways of being and things that they're thinking and feelings that they're having. And I can guarantee you, they're not thinking about you when they trigger you. They're not. They're in their own world, doing their own thing. Whatever gets triggered in you is yours. So when we can look at it and just take a second, like, okay, I feel uncomfortable. I don't like it. That's okay. I don't like it, and that's okay. I don't like it, and that's okay. And then you go, okay, what is it that I'm actually feeling and thinking right now? And when you get objective about it, like you're kind of popping out of your feeling and you get objective and you're like, what's the story I'm making up about this? And what's the feeling that I have right now? When you get objective like that, you start to see your experience of yourself and of life in a different kind of perspective. You're popping out of the emotion. You're no longer identifying with it. And you're here, like almost in like your higher self point of view, witnessing the emotion that you're having and saying, okay, I recognize that this child or this person has triggered a feeling up in me. What's that feeling? Where is it coming from? Like, what's the story I'm making up about it? And then just kind of like, I journal because that helps me think, but do it however you want. I do recommend journaling because it gets it out of the looping mind and onto paper. Just free write and say all of the things that you're not supposed to say. Hide the journal from everyone else, but say the things. Like, you've got to get honest with yourself if you're ever going to transcend it, you know? So say the like, I just really don't like them right now. Like, it makes me mad or whatever. Get it out of your system. Say the things, because once you get through all of the emotion of it, you're going to find the truth. And it's going to lead you right to whatever inside of you has been calling for your attention, calling for your love, calling for your acceptance. And it's going to show you if it's something that needed to be built in you. Like in the example of like, I wasn't owning my power like I could. I was, in fact, hiding a lot of my power. And here she was just like, yeah, that's going to trigger, right? Like, yeah, that's going to trigger. And so it's this moment where it's like, oh, like it's safe to own my full power. I can own, if she's 7 and she can do it, I can do that. So do you see how it like takes you to a new level, all from a trigger that didn't feel good, right? So I love approaching life this way because one, it puts me in my own seat of power. No longer am I dependent on anyone around me to be a certain way, to do a certain way in order for me to be okay. Like, I got me. And I'm a big advocate for that. Like, I've got me, you've got you, and if we both own our emotionality, we're gold. We're gold. Now, children are a little bit different, right? We have to teach them how to do this. But you see what I'm saying? So in that, as you get those little triggers that come up, eventually what's going to happen is that you move through life and you work through all the triggers. I guess I should finish the story. Like that first year of Robert and I, and it was like trigger, 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 because we are who we are, you know, and I teach this work and I understand this work, and he has always been very open to this work. We were able to do that healing work together. I know that's not always the case for everyone. And I want to tell you that even if your partner doesn't do it with you, you owning your own and doing it within yourself will create major shifts in your partner. So don't feel like you need the same thing, right? I need you to do this work with me in order for me to feel okay. You don't. You really don't. And in fact, a lot of the triggers that I had with Robert in the first year, it was me going into a room by myself and just rage journaling. Like getting the emotion out until I could get to that neutral state. And then once I was in that neutral, non emotional state, because I had moved through all of the emotion of it, got the thing that was mine that was getting hit and triggered, then I was able to go and talk to him about it. Then I was able to say, like, this happened. You didn't mean anything by this. And I know that, but it triggered this part of me. And so it hit this in me. I was able to approach him from a very like neutral, non-ego. I'm taking full ownership for my emotion. And now I'm just sharing with you what I experienced. And sometimes, sometimes you share, sometimes you don't share. It depends on like where you're at. But through doing that, I'm gonna end on this, but this could be a whole other conversation. When you work through your triggers with your people and you own them and you dissipate them, you're neutralizing energies. We're nothing but electrons, protons, and neutrons. And if something has a charge, just like in an atom, it's charged, you're going to feel it. So as you do the work to neutralize it, it takes away the charge that happens in your body. So as you do that, you're going to experience like a bonding with that person. You're going to get so much closer with that person because what happens typically, especially in our partnerships, is you have a trigger and then you throw that trigger on them and it triggers them. And then they're throwing that energy back on you. And then neither one of you know how to handle it. So you end up not dealing with it. And then it creates this wall between you. And as that keeps happening, the wall gets thicker, the wall gets bigger, and soon you are living with your partner, but it doesn't feel like your partner anymore. It feels like somebody that you just coexist with and you're just trying to get by. We don't want that, right? We don't want that. So the faster you can deal with the triggers, the faster you can deal with the things that come up, it's going to prevent that wall from getting built. And then you have this beautiful partnership. Like, they talk about like the honeymoon period and it's like, oh, it always ends. The only reason it ends is because we end up building these walls. If you never build the wall, your bond just gets stronger and it's just more fun and there's more joy and there's more laughter and there's more good. And then you get better and better and better at being able to handle this stuff. So we're going to get triggered. And that's inevitable. It's not about that. It's about, can I own it to the point where I don't allow the emotion and the trigger to be running my life? I'm the one who's in control. Click, click. All right, my loves, that was good. Thank you for being here live. I'm so happy if this helped you today, if this helped you to even see things in a 1 millimeter shift different way. It's going to drastically change how you kind of approach life and approach the people in your life. So I love you. I'm so happy to share all the things. Chris says doing this work changes everything. I agree. I agree. I agree. I agree. Because we are the only ones that are in control of ourselves. So when we really start owning that, that's when you can really start to make some huge, huge shifts in your life. I love you guys. Have a beautiful rest of your day. I'll see you Wednesday, but Friday we will not have a morning show because I am going out of town. So I'll see you back here on Wednesday for another episode of the morning show. Please share the show, share and like and all of the things, especially if this is one that you think someone else in your life needs to hear. Share the show with them. Thank you so much. I love you. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Goodbye, my love.